Tonight, a new COVID-19 case on island and an announcement that mandatory quarantine will no longer be free of charge. An 18-year-old is charged for the maiming of a 9-year-old whose mother is now appealing for public assistance to fund surgery to remove the bullet still lodged in his head. And the Prime Minister's reaction to the national protest staged against him on Sunday. The details of these stories and more are coming up.
This is the Hot 7 Nightly News with Lovelace and Amy Joseph.
Good night. It is Wednesday, the 7th of October, 2020. Welcome to the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. I'm Lovely St. Amy Joseph. Thank you for joining us. Amid a relaxed atmosphere due to the successful handling of COVID-19 on island to date, sobering news emerged on Wednesday that the island has a new COVID-19 case. It brings the number of cases recorded so far to 28. The individual is a 29-year-old female national who arrived in St. Lucia on Sunday, the 27th of September from the United States. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar George says she was placed in government quarantine on arrival.
As per national protocol, she was tested on the 7th day in government quarantine and upon receipt of her test results was transferred to the respiratory hospital for care. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has commenced the contact tracing and testing will be done on all who may have been in contact with the case. Quarantine continues to be an important component of the containment and overall management of St. Lucia's COVID-19 response. Quarantine is necessary for people who may have been exposed to an infection. It restricts their movement as they are at risk for possibly developing related symptoms.
From March 2020, quarantine services have been provided free of charge. However, officials say it has become necessary to apply a fee which has been subsidized by the government. Prime Minister Alan Shastny spoke on the necessity of the move on Wednesday.
Unfortunately, it costs us around $1 million a month to maintain. And sadly, government does not have the resources to carry this burden by itself. But we also believe that the bulk of persons who wanted to come home have been able to come home. So the good news is that for the most part, the quarantine period has been reduced to 7 days. So if you come in with a negative COVID test, you go into quarantine for 7 days, and the 7th day you test negative, we allow you to go out.
That was Prime Minister Alan Shastny. Now, as you just heard, St. Lucians planning to return home after the 15th of October will need to carry some extra cash to cover the new fees levied on mandatory quarantine at government-operated sites. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar George stressed the importance of quarantine in keeping the COVID-19 situation under control, but also emphasized the need to apply the fee. Shaka Wooding reports.
In March of 2020, state quarantine sites were established using various hotels to facilitate an influx of returning nationals and any non-nationals who arrived on island. With the resumption of tourism activity in July, non-nationals arriving on island proceeded to quarantine at certified hotels, whilst returning nationals continued to utilize state quarantine facilities free of charge. Now, after 7 months of offering free quarantine to the public, local officials have announced that returning nationals will be made to pay a subsidized fee for state quarantine. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sharon Belmar George said this move is necessary to ensure the continued availability of state quarantine. Here is the breakdown of the new fees from the CMO.
Effective October 15, 2020, quarantine daily fees will be applied as follows. For single occupancy, US $95. For double occupancy, US $165. And for triple occupancy, $240 US. Double and triple occupancy applies to families within the same unit. Home quarantine will apply to minors, persons with specific health conditions, and those with conditions to allow home quarantine.
The CMO went on to stress the importance of quarantine in St. Lucia's COVID-19 response. She noted that the restriction of possible COVID-19 cases, cutting off all interaction with the general population, has been imperative to St. Lucia's success in mitigating the pandemic.
Quarantine continues to be an important component of the containment and overall management of St. Lucia's COVID-19 response. Quarantine is necessary for people who may have been exposed to an infection. It restricts their movement as they are at risk for possibly developing related symptoms. Quarantine requires people to stay in a designated location for a specific period of time. Active monitoring in quarantine includes temperature checks and checking for respiratory symptoms.
Dr. Belmar George went on to stress that the fight against COVID-19 continues. She urged the public to continue to adhere to COVID-19 protocols. As of October 7, 2020, St. Lucia has recorded 28 cases of COVID-19, 27 of which have fully recovered. No deaths have been recorded. Jacka Wooding, Hot 7 News.
18-year-old Kyle Austin has been charged with maiming in connection with the shooting of 9-year-old Yan Henry of Cicero. The charge was preferred on Wednesday. The mother of the 9-year-old says the background story of how her son lost his eye is way more disturbing and sinister than what has been circulated. She is now seeking public assistance for funds to pay for surgery to remove the bullet that is still lodged in her son's head. Rochelle Gonzalez has more.
When the news of the Saturday afternoon shooting in Cicero of 9-year-old Yan Henry made the headlines, emotions ran high with the family, who was struggling to come to terms with an incident which could have ended in tragedy. With the mood more subdued, Renata Henry, the mother of the 9-year-old, opened up to Hot 7 TV and told the background story of the incident, which according to her is as sinister as it is heart-wrenching. On Wednesday afternoon, 18-year-old Kyle Austin of Cicero was officially charged by police in connection with the shooting of the 9-year-old. Initial reports of the incident, including a claim made by a viral voice note, stated that the shooting was an accident. However, Henry said there was nothing accidental about the injury that has maimed her son for life.
My son told me the guy came by his father. The guy told him something. He answered the guy back, and the guy found like he was too managed to answer him. He hold him in a headlock and he tell him he's going to make him an old man. And that's when he shot him.
So your son was shot point blank?
To his head, yes.
By a grown man?
Yes.
Do you have any idea why this person was even in the area?
I don't know. Well, somebody I think sold a bike for him. He wanted to sell it for my son's father. So my son's father told me, he told him, you're not buying bike that don't have papers. And that's how it happened. He left them and he went and bathed, not knowing that was going to happen. He says when he had a shot burst, he ran out. And my son running towards him, telling him, Daddy, so-and-so shot me, so-and-so shot me. Yeah.
So were there any witnesses to see what happened between your son?
Well, his grandmother heard the conversation between the guy and him. But she wasn't expecting that to happen. But she heard when the guy said, I'm going to make you an old man.
Henry said her son has since been discharged, but her heart is broken for the hardship that her son will undoubtedly face in life as a result of his injury. She said whilst her son appears to be in good spirits, the impact of the shooting is evident. Both the boy's mother and grandmother, Ann Daniel, said the 9-year-old and his siblings are clearly traumatized. As for your son, how is he doing this? How is he taking all of this?
Well, last night he told me, Mommy, I don't care what people say about my eye, but I'm just happy that I'm alive. And he used a phrase, Jesus is Lord. That had me so, I felt a little better, not 100%, but when he told me, Mommy, Jesus is, I tell him, what? He told me, Mommy, Jesus is Lord, I'm alive. He don't want to go back by his father. He tell his father he don't want to go back because he'll always remember what they do him there.
Also,
We don't live together, yeah. Okay. He was by his father, so he tell the father he don't want to go back there. He rather stay by his mother. He tell his father if he go back there, he'll remember what happened to him. And he's not only my son, I have other children and my daughter, my older son, it's like everybody that's, my older son, I don't know what word to use. It's like that alone destroyed all my children. My daughter don't want to go to school. They don't want to go to school. Because my daughter going to school in Cicero and she said she don't want to go, So it's not only my son, they damage everybody.
Her first son is 15. And you know what he said to me? Nanny, because they call me Nanny. Nanny, you know what I feel like doing? Plug out one of my eye, just for me to be like my brother, so that the two of us can live together with that eye. Because I know it will be a problem for him. People will give him jokes. And that tear me down. I am living with that. I tell him, don't do it. He tell me, Nanny, you can say what you want, but that's all that on my mind to do is just take out my eye.
Although the youngster has been discharged from the hospital, the bullet that has cost him his eye is still lodged in his head. The young mother is now appealing to members of the public to help her raise funds to have the bullet removed. Okay, now we understand that you're holding a fundraiser.
Yeah, because the bullet is still in there. We're trying to see if we could bring him back next so they can take it out.
So give us the details about it.
Well, we're waiting to go to the doctor Monday to finalize everything. I just asking if I can get some help with my son because I see he's so young to be living so with one eye and a bullet in his head. So even if he have the one eye, but I would feel happier if he don't have the bullet because that's what scares me right now, for him to have a bullet in his head.
Persons willing to aid the family financially are asked to contact the mother at 721-2541 or the grandmother and Daniel at 730-4813. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Rochelle Gonzalez.
Thank you, Rochelle. The island's Prime Minister says the opposition St. Lucia Labour Party was free to hold their march and voice their grievances. However, he says he is left to wonder about the real reason for their anger.
Prime Minister Alan Chastanet is seemingly not fazed about the national protest which took place on Sunday, October 4th. Thousands of St. Lucians across the political divide took to the streets of Castries to voice their disenchantment towards the ruling United Workers' Party administration. The most recent source of contention for the SLP and its supporters was the passing of the COVID-19 bill in both the upper and lower house, despite calls by civil society groups to defer the bill for further consultation. The appointment of 3 new senators, 2 of whom are independent and temporary, was also a sore spot for the opposition, who deemed the appointment as unconstitutional. When asked for his thoughts on the events, the PM said the protesters and the organizers all had the rights to express themselves as they saw fit.
I indicated to them that they should have their march and please be safe. I'm glad that for the most part everybody was safe. We live in a very democratic society, but certainly I think the idea that the Labour Party is trying to indicate that my government is not performing, the evidence says to the contrary. That we are in any way trying to be dictatorial. We're not. The fact is that the provisions that we have were done on a collective basis and are working.
The PM said nothing on Sunday was news to his ears.
We're in that season where everybody believes, I'm trying to guess when the Prime Minister is going to call the elections. They're free to do that. I've heard them give many predictions, and what they say is that if you make enough guesses, you might eventually get it right. So look, there was nothing that I really saw in the march. It was the same old message, one of which does not take into consideration the reality on the ground, and they continue to try to portray a side of St. Lucia that doesn't exist.
The St. Lucia Labour Party has stated that the march was only the beginning of what is to come in the fight to remove the PM from office. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Rochelle Gonzalez.
This is the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. Still to come, the straight-talking viral priest speaks ahead of his hot seat debut. The CCC defends what some say is an unnecessary facelift to the Derek Walcott Square during the economic pressures brought about by COVID-19. And the Minister for National Security and a top cop have a difference of opinion on the culpability of officers who respond to horrific incidents when images of those scenes go viral. That and more after the break.